If you're unfamiliar with Reverb, we are a consulting firm focused on people operations and people development. So we do a lot of interim fractional HR support as well as coaching and leadership development. We host these meetups. Again, thank you to those who have been here before, but if you haven't, we host these meetups every other month of roughly five-ish times a year. And we bring great speakers and great partners like Emily from Sparrow, who's joining us today to talk about leave administration. And I don't know if you can see Emily up there, but Emily's shirt says leave is complicated. So I'm sure that's why we're all here today to talk a little bit more about this and how we can maybe make it a little less complicated. So before we jump in and I let Emily introduce herself a little bit more, we just wanted to do a quick thank you to our sponsors. You can see their logos here on this slide, and I see some of them have joined us today. So thank you, Katie. I see you from Parker Smith and Feek / PBS, longtime supporter of Reverb and our meetups. So thank you so much for being here and for being a sponsor. And Joshua, I see you as well from Carney Badley Spellman. Our employment attorney and been a huge support to us and other clients as well. And I forgot to mention that Katie is also our benefits broker and support. So really great with working with all sizes of companies, but especially getting great things for small companies. We also have Parker Staffing and AHT Insurance. I don't know if anyone joined from there, but also great partners in helping us put this on, as well as our Humans Beyond Resources podcast. So and I think someone mentioned there's just a slide on the screen. All it is a slide that has the, do you see it? Yeah, if you don't see it, let me know, but it is just a slide. Okay, great, Nicole, thank you. And that's all. So I'm ready to get kicked off. Again, we're talking about we're talking about leave administration. So we have Emily, like I mentioned, from Sparrow, so joining us. So Emily, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll kind of dive into some of the questions that we had started to brainstorm.
Yeah, so no slides for our conversation today, trying to keep it an interactive process, ADA joke for anyone that's paying attention or has had to deal with that. So hopefully we get some lovely questions from you all in addition to what we have prepared today. So my name's Emily Ulberg. I'm an account executive at a company called Sparrow. Sparrow does full service end-to-end leave of absence administration. We're a high-tech, high-touch platform. So excited to talk through some of that today. My experience with Sparrow started about 2.5 years ago when I actually went on a leave my own at a former company. And we were pretty small at that time. They only had about 10 employees in the US. And the leave was not handled very well. Looking back at it now, I see that they were trying their best. They had no idea what they were doing, but the information they communicated to me was, we'll do everything we need to do to stay compliant. Not we'll do everything we need to do to support you. It was, we're going to stay compliant, which at 10 employees means almost nothing. So it was a really enlightening experience for me. And at that time, while I was out welcoming my new daughter, I had a lot of time to kind of reflect and say, oh, what kind of a company do I want to work for? I really don't feel valued after the experience I just went through. And so I discovered Sparrow, a company that does leave of absence administration in a way that makes employees feel really valued, that benefits companies. And it sounded like a win-win-win. And so I'm really excited to just talk about how complicated leave can be and how to do it better for companies of any size.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. I mentioned, when we were preparing for this, that I have had many conversations, and just this week, another conversation about a company who, their leave process is kind of complicated and a little bit off, and there's issues with payroll accuracy and employee experience, as you mentioned, and all sorts of things. And so it's often well-meaning and we're trying to do the right things, but because it's so complicated, it can be hard. So kind of want to dive in today. So please ask your questions. You can either throw them in the chat and I'll pull them in as we're talking, or if you really want to, unmute and ask, you're welcome to do that. You can always just raise your hand on the virtual Zoom, thing, or just unmute and ask your question as well. So just wanted to make sure you all know that we want this to be interactive as well. So let's start by talking about the fact that there's so many various, different leave programs, and the fact that so many companies now are employing people all over the US. How are you finding HR teams being able to manage the leave administration process since there's no consistent paid leave program at a federal level, and each state that does have a leave program may be done a little bit differently and administered a little differently?
Yeah, it's a mess. If you're feeling like leave is complicated at your organization, you are absolutely in your right mind. It's a lot. And I think part of this is coming because there are two forces kind of going at the same time. One is leave laws are increasing. So California was the first one to pioneer this way back in 2004. It took a while for other states to catch up. New Jersey was the second one in 2009. There are now 14 states that either have paid leave live now or have it coming up in the next couple of years. Oregon and Colorado just recently launched theirs. The ones we have coming down the pike are Maine, Maryland, Delaware, and Minnesota. Our first Midwestern state to going to be offer paid family leave. And with that was the big push to remote work through COVID. So when pre-COVID, a lot of companies, they were in office, everyone was pretty close by. You may have had the remote employee here or there. And then when we went remote first in COVID, a lot of people and a lot of companies decided to stay that way. Now, a lot of organizations are hiring remote first, or they have kind of a hybrid office. Now, organizations are dealing with a much wider spread of an employee footprint than they had before. Maybe they used to have employees in 2 states. Now they have employees in 32 states. And with the legislative landscapes we have right now, there's 476 laws related to leave of absence at the federal, state, and local or municipal level. So if you have people in 30 states, that's more than 300 laws for lean HR teams to keep up with. So if you have one benefits admin or one HR operations person, that's a huge compliance risk for them to keep up on these constantly changing laws. Sarah, you mentioned not having a federal paid leave program. I honestly don't think having a federal program will fix this in any way whatsoever. It's just going to make it more complicated, right? Because there's no way California, Washington, New York, New Jersey are going to be satisfied with whatever the federal legislation rolled out. Fed might be 8 weeks, 12 weeks. We know other states are just going to up the ante. And so it's just going to increase the level of complexity for everyone across the board.
Yeah, that is complicated. And are you finding that when people do have multiple states that and they're managing it themselves, are they able to stay compliant, or is it just
Most of the people I speak with say, you know what, I'm really scared I'm doing something wrong. This keeps me up at night. I just hope we don't have a lawsuit. I hope we don't have something else. So a lot more and more organizations are choosing to partner with outsourced HR consultancies to manage this, their disability carriers to manage it, or something like a Sparrow, which is really able to take it off of their plate 100% and keep them compliant.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So, we talked about so many companies having employees across different states and all the various, leave laws and things. What type of leave programs do you see them most commonly adopting, right? So if you have employees in Washington and maybe a state that doesn't, how are people managing across the global, or the the national footprint?
Yeah, I think it varies based on company culture. Some organizations are just doing the bare minimum across the board. Whatever the state requires me to do for that employee, I will do. My hands are tied. Others, and I'm guessing many of them are on this call today, are working at organizations that are a little bit more forward thinking, a little bit more progressive. So they're looking at, okay, which state is offering the maximum benefit for our employees? And let's spread that across the board. So if California is offering 12, 14, 16 weeks, let's give everyone that same length of leave. Interestingly, it actually ends up creating some of an inequitable experience no matter what, because an employee taking leave in a state that has a paid family leave benefit versus someone that doesn't, if they're getting paid leave from their company, there's going to be a lot more work that an employee in California, Washington, Oregon, Colorado, et cetera, has to do that someone in Florida, Texas, et cetera, doesn't. So even though there's more protection, it's more work for the employee, it's more work for HR. And so Sparrow's approach to this and how we've been so successful is we're actually able to take that work off of HR teams, keep them compliant, tell them exactly how much to pay employees while they're out. And Sparrow's biggest point of differentiation is that we actually do the employee paperwork too. So I know we mentioned there's a couple of different ways that companies are doing leave management if they choose to outsource. Sparrow, of course, is not the only option out there, but we are the only one that does the employee paperwork. So I think it warrants mentioning. If you're trying to create a really fair, really equitable, lovely experience for all of your employees across the board, Sparrow is actually able to make it so, regardless of whatever legislation is in place.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about that, but I saw that note when we were preparing for this, kind of how um you would have somebody going to the Washington State, paid leave program and filling things out and then having to send things back. And so it's great from an employee experience standpoint, right? Because the big thing in this, having gone on a leave myself and having just the support shifts, if it's a parental leave or a caregiver leave of some sort, like you've got so many other things kind of on your mind or
Yeah.
plate to take care of.
We're getting close to tax season, and I think it's pretty similar. Except it's like having to do your taxes at the moment in your life when you're suddenly under the most stress you've ever been, regardless whatever type of leave you're taking, even a parental leave, very stressful. And there aren't a lot of resources in place for employees to do this on their own. That's why at Sparrow, we really just want to support employees the best we can. So we're able to, it's like working with a CPA to do your taxes instead of trying to figure out the forms yourself or using a free version of TurboTax. We just take it over for them, keep them in the loop so that they can focus on the reason they took leave in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And not have any surprises. I remember, yeah, 8 years ago having some surprises in my leave, like knowing from the very beginning that I was going to be out for a certain amount of time and then getting a call right before I was about to come back. I had 3 more weeks and that I was going to be dropped from benefits because I was out too long, right? And so that's great. So having, that's just hard. And if someone's managing it themselves or they're not kind of thinking ahead or have that kind of, um, you have such a bad, experience for the employee and that can be really hard.
Everyone's got their own horror story. If you don't, you've never touched a leave or known someone that's taken a leave.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, let's come back to some of these other things related to, maybe specifically parental leave. But I kind of want to talk, I think what we've talked about so far is a lot focused on maybe parental leave policies, but there are really so many different types of leave to consider in the full employee life cycle, right? So it's not just, having or adopting a child, but there are aging parents or, for caregiving or, other types of things. So as a company, what should I be, what types of leaves should we maybe highlight a little bit more and include in our policies?
Yeah, and if this is something anyone on the call is actively thinking about, I have a really great resource that will be available after in the I want to say the show notes, but it's not quite a show.
I mean, it is, I mean, it's the closest thing we get to a show. Yeah, so
Yeah.
Kylie will be sending out to everyone through the Meetup group this recording and lots of resources that'll be really helpful with a link. So,
So Sparrow recently released our annual benchmarking report that discusses not only what types of leave a policy should include, also broken down by company size, because companies of different sizes tend to offer different benefits, but also with the leaves you're including, how long of a paid leave, if you choose to offer one, should it be? Some companies offer paid medical leaves, paid caregiver leaves. Some of that, for some of them, it's 2 weeks. For some of them, it could be 8 weeks, 10 weeks, etc. So that benchmarking report is a super valuable resource for anyone that's thinking about revising their policy or also wants to see about how their policy compares with others of the same company size, etc. So to talk about the question, I want to also commend you for using the term parental leave instead of primary, secondary leave, maternity or paternity leave, because this inclusive language also really matters. And if you are using other terms, I encourage you to think about what kind of a culture you are creating. Um, so in terms of the other types of leave we see, parental leave does end up being the vast majority of leaves that we see. The other two, I would say, are typically, thank you, Zoom, medical leave and caregiving leave, maybe not so celebratory, especially with a rise in caregiving leaves. I think those are going to be increasing in the next 10 years or so because we're having the baby boomer generation come out of the workforce, and now this sandwich generation of people both caring for new additions to their family as well as caring for elderly and aging parents is increasing quite a bit. So definitely those are the big four, we would say, parental leaves being both birthing and non-birthing parents, and then family and medical. But there are other types of leaves that are also increasing as well. Bereavement leaves, jury duty voting leaves, safe leave is a big one that's trending now too, as well as bone marrow and organ donation. I think bereavement leave is probably the most common one we see out of all of those other leaves. And a really heartwarming legislation that we've seen very recently is the inclusion of pregnancy loss under that definition of bereavement leave. Both California and New York launched legislation in January of this year to cover pregnancy loss as a form of bereavement leave.
yeah, I think that's so important to consider to include. And even if your state doesn't require it, including that in your bereavement leave policies can be really important. And then I think
Yeah.
another thing I'll highlight on bereavement leave in particular, we work with an organization called Bannister Advisors and got some language around our bereavement leave policy to, again, try to make it more inclusive and make it to focus on close relationships because
Mhm.
that a family and looks different for everyone, right? And I think traditional bereavement policies tend to focus on, direct family, right? And so we want to focus more on, using language like close relationships, so people can use that time with for the for those that are important to them, right? And it may not be a parent, a spouse, a child, but someone else important in your life.
Absolutely. Other types of leave you mentioned, like not covered under like legislation. There are some there are really progressive forms of leave that I'm very excited about. I hope they catch on and we can create more of a groundswell. One is NICU leave. So you can imagine you have your child, they're a preemie. You may end up spending your 12 weeks of FMLA disability and bonding time in the NICU. And then what do? Are you supposed to come back to work immediately after that? There's one company that we partner with at Sparrow whose parental leave doesn't start until the family is home from the hospital. They have NICU leave until then, and then once they're home from the hospital, the bonding time and disability time starts, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Others are like grandparent leave. So if you're still in the workforce and your son or daughter is having a child welcoming a new addition, it doesn't quite qualify as a serious health condition under FMLA to take leave for someone else's pregnancy. But there are some companies offering leave so that they can go care for the new child and welcome that family. Another one is menopause leave or increased leave for employees going through that process as well. So some really interesting progressive things happening out in the market.
Yeah, and are all of those things in your benchmarking report as far as like different types of leaves and what people are offering?
Those three, unfortunately, are not, but I am hearing more about them. So hopefully more next year if more companies pick them up.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we included something related to kind of taking time off for menopause or severe like what's it called? Like period related things in our policies as well, just in making that more of a norm and making sure people know they're supported right through the various life cycles of while they're at work, right? Um, One of the questions oh, yeah, I know the others were in there, but I'm curious on the caregiving leave, in particular, if you have any stats, kind of what people aren't on average are offering. It,
Yeah, let me pull it up for caregiver. And one thing that's top of mind is we've actually seen an increase in the length of leaves. So the same like approximate number of people are taking caregiver leaves, but people are staying out for longer. It used to be just a couple weeks. We're seeing now people staying out for more. 5 weeks is a lot more common. Non-birthing parental leave duration has also increased dramatically. Can imagine a couple years ago, a decade ago, when things were a little bit different. New fathers didn't necessarily feel comfortable leaving the workforce. And now that there's increased legislation in place, there's more cultural conversations. They feel more comfortable taking more of leave that's available to them.
That's good to hear because I think that's a big thing, right? Is having people in your company, leaders, other people like you that are actually utilizing the leaves. I think that was a problem that I saw at a prior company is, people feeling like if they took the leave that they would be kind of thought differently of, or right, like because no one else was taking it. And so I think that's so important to hear that people are actually, there's an increase in those people using it that maybe aren't the primary birthing parent or aren't the birthing parent. So that's good to hear.
Yeah. And then in terms of duration of leave, of paid leave, we're seeing the ranges vary widely, which is interesting. Caregiver, we're seeing some companies offer just a single week of paid leave, others are offering 16 or 18 weeks, and medical also anything from 1 to 2 weeks all the way to 25 plus weeks. So it varies highly.
Mhm. And you mentioned safe time. Is that similar to like the sick and safe time, say that the state of Washington, requires? And so, obviously there's like legislation, but are you seeing companies offer that when there's not legislation as well?
Yeah, so similar to some of the more generous companies where they just want to give everyone access to the most generous policies across the board instead of differentiating by state.
Mhm.
They'll try and streamline the administration by making it one policy across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I go into more questions that I had prepared, are there any from those of you that are here that kind of maybe deal with this on a regular basis or are building or updating your own policies related to leave? Okay, I did a 7-second pause, but if you think of them, throw them in the chat or feel free to unmute. We've talked a lot about kind of the logistics of leave and the various legislation. I think another thing that we really should focus on is kind of beyond the administration. Yeah, another area that can cause strain for people going on leave is, the team, the managers, the employee themselves, like how is their job going to be covered? while they're gone and those types of things. So what are some of the ways you've seen organizations kind of handle this and make sure that the employee is, well supported and feels good to take their leave and to come back in a less stressful way, and also that the team and manager have support while maybe someone is out on leave?
Yeah, I think it's really important to treat someone taking leave with a lot of respect and give them as much education around the process as you can because it's very confusing. There's a lot of legalese. What is job protection, right? What's wage replacement? If I'm not on a leave that is job protected, should I be worried about my job? If I'm going to be out for 3, 4 months, how does that impact my career goals? There are also compliance concerns for managers. This could be the first time they're having anyone take a leave of absence. Do they know what they can say, what they can't say, how often they can contact someone that's out on leave? So there's a lot of uncertainty there. And for some of the leaner people teams, what we see is they want to provide people with an amazing experience. They want to really hold someone's hand through the process. So they'll book lots of time, they'll walk them through things, they'll make spreadsheets, they'll make templates to try and educate people about it. They'll try and research as much as they can, try and find the state portal, and even call states on an employee's behalf to try and get information for them. And the response they get from those paid family leave states is, oh, we can't talk to you, we can only talk to the employee. So it's a lot of effort, sometimes for not a lot of result, unfortunately. And so at Sparrow, what we do is we pair each employee with a dedicated leave specialist, a dedicated contact for the duration of their leave. So this is a person who's a leave expert. They're able to answer all the employees' questions, as well as contact the state portal, the disability carrier on the employee's behalf, again, so they can focus on why they took leave in the first place. And then we also give managers additional resources, letting them know you have an employee that's going to take a leave. What does that mean? What can you do? What can't you do? And how can you enable that employee to be successful when they're coming back? If they've been gone for a while, you may need to treat them like an almost new employee when they come back, right? Re-onboard them to any processes that have changed. If you're in office, make sure they have a desk. Like a lot of things can fall through the cracks that have a real impact on the employee experience you're creating. And so you want to ensure the employee feels supported, feels taken care of when they are choosing to come back to their company.
Yeah, I think those are all great points, and especially like the transitioning back, right? And so some other things that we see are kind of partial ramp in times, right? So maybe not going 100% back right away, but part-time or kind of easing into the role.
Yeah.
Also having,
Do we
oh,
have
go
any
ahead.
people on the call that do like ramped return to work or partial return to work for employees after they come back from a leave? Show of hands or emojis. If not, it's a great idea.
I don't see any, but yeah.
I sorry, my keyboard's like not working right now, so I can't type in there, but we do offer like coming back at like a 0.6 FTE, so a part-time if that's requested, but it goes a lot of times it ends up going through job accommodations
Yeah.
um, rather than through the LOA team.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, I didn't even talk about accommodations yet. So the
Yeah.
interactive process of someone coming back on potentially modified duty, or we talked a lot about parental leave. Someone's diagnosed with postpartum depression and or anxiety. It's extremely common. And so if there are additional things that you can do to support them upon their return, it goes a long way. But it's a lot to manage if you're a team of one or even a team of two to start putting together resources, making sure everything's properly documented to manage that interactive process. So talking a lot about Sparrow, but we help with that as well.
No worries. Yeah, and I think another thing is if you have the ability to kind of put someone interim into a role, right? Or give, someone a stretch assignment just so that person that's on leave doesn't feel like stressed about leaving their role behind, or that there's going to be important things that like aren't going to get done and then they have to come back to something that has sat, um, not being done for 3 months, or that there's been too much put on, the team, and there's a lot of stress on the team when they come back, because they've been kind of managing, a role and a half or something like that, right? And so I think that's another important thing to consider, is how you can use maybe like interim support to kind of backfill for people that are on, extended leaves.
Absolutely. And Sarah, at Reverb, like if you have a client who is going to be missing their head of people or a people ops leader for a number of months, I'm sure those are roles Reverb has filled before, right?
Yeah, we absolutely do. We do that among others. So I think, we find that that really can help, and just create a better employee experience and have much more retention of, not just those on leave, but those that are, um, still there and maybe picking up extra work,
100%.
and burnout. Yeah. Um, that's great. Let's see. What else were we? Yeah, what else that we haven't talked about that you would want to highlight or just talk about, like, to make people aware? So I think it's great that we talked about kind of 14 different states and more coming down, the pipeline. But yeah, anything else, and like the various types of leave to consider as far as beyond, parental leave.
I'm curious, for the group on the call today, how many of your companies offer some kind of a company specific paid leave policy? Show of hands or emojis. Got a couple? Yeah. I think the pay component of leave can also
Mhm.
be especially confusing. And there isn't a lot of standardization between how companies do it. It's it feels like the Wild West. Everyone's doing stuff a little bit different. So if you have an employee that the company offers a paid leave policy, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 20 weeks, 2 weeks, doesn't matter what it is. If an employee is in a state that also offers paid family medical leave, and or they're getting a disability check claim as well, there are multiple sources of income, and how do you manage that process? So we see companies managing it in about 4 different ways. One is they don't do anything at all. They say, "Hey, employee, we value you so much that we're not gonna make you go through the rigmarole of filing for disability, for any state benefits that you're applicable for. Just go on leave, and we'll keep paying you. And when you come back, lovely, happy to have you, and nothing has changed from a payroll perspective." Anyone else getting heart palpitations and being like, "Oh my God," the problem
Uh,
with that?
yeah.
From a compliance perspective, you could be getting in some trouble if someone's leave just continues to extend. Um, Also, there's a lot of money being left on the table from an organizational standpoint. In this economy, it doesn't make sense to not maximize any source of wage replacement that's available to an employee. But a lot of organizations doing this just really want to take the best care of their employees, their assets, as they possibly can. So Sparrow actually recently announced we've saved our customers over $100 million in payroll costs by allowing them to essentially have their cake and eat it too. We work directly with the employee. We file for the benefits on their behalf. The employee is not doing any extra work. They're having an amazing experience, and the company gets that money back. Win-win-win all around. So that's one method, paying 100%. Highly do not recommend. If anyone is doing that now, please come talk to me after this call. We'll fix it for you. Another method I see is companies just paying their employees at 100% of their salary, but asking them to share how much they have received from benefits. So still making them apply, but keeping them on salary while they're out, just so there's no gaps in pay. Again, they want to have an amazing experience for the employee, but that also comes with risks, right? From a company perspective, what if the employee does not come back? Or what if the employee filed incorrectly. Instead of $30,000 in benefits that they were supposed to get, they only got 10. Are you going to make up the difference each time? Those costs build up. And also, frankly, from an employee's perspective, coming back from leave and then needing to write your company a giant check to reimburse them, also not great. That's another method we see companies doing, really not the best, but it is quite common. The ideal method is to estimate how much the benefits are going to be, keep someone on payroll, but only pay them that top-up amount. So not overpaying, not underpaying, just pay them that delta. The challenge with this is it can be pretty hard to calculate and know how much an employee is going to be receiving from other sources. In many states, it's based on previous work history and income. And in some protective employee states, which tend to be the ones that offer leave, like I just keep harping on California because they were doing it first. You can't ask an employee what they were previously paid. So if you are a newer employer for them, you may not know how much they're going to be receiving from the state. So at best, you're making a guess, but you're going to end up having to reconcile anyway. So those same problems can still present themselves. And then the last way we see companies doing this is not paying an employee anything while they're out on leave. You're going out on leave, they stop payroll. Sarah, I saw your eyes go, whoa.
Yeah.
It's not an ideal employee experience, but it does effectively prevent overpayment. So they stop payroll until someone confirms how much benefits they've received from another place. They share those with HR and payroll, who then makes up the difference very accurately, but not a great employee experience, especially when it can take so long to file and then receive benefits. These organizations don't necessarily process things in the quickest way possible. So also not recommended.
Yeah, it is a challenge. And yeah, I was just talking to a consultant this week. We met up and we were chatting about how he's there to help fix their leave administration process right now. And they had this payroll issue and they were, their calculator wasn't, they had some calculator they were using. It wasn't clear how they got around to that and all of that, right? And so there were just so many kind of pay issues, overpayment really, like paying, a lot more, which is also, something with, if you do have short-term disability and you're paying too much, that can also get you in trouble, right? As far as kind of making up the difference in salaries and things like that. So yeah, thanks for highlighting the payroll complexities in the various ways. But I know that's a big pain point and was just talking with someone today about how to manage that. And, like how maybe Washington even does the calculation differently than say California as far as how what you're eligible for from the state program can vary.
Exactly. And if you're trying to make that estimate and do the top up payment the way is most recommended, it's not an easy thing to do. State benefits pay out on like a 7-day week. If you're paying companies on a 5-day work week, you're on a semi-monthly pay schedule. How do you square that circle, right? It's so complicated. And then it's really hard to chase down employees to get their notice of computation back to know how much they were actually paid out. So again, if you're struggling with this, it's okay. It's really, really hard. If you want help, I'd love to have a conversation because Sparrow streamlines all of this. We make the payroll calculations. We can tell companies exactly what that top up needs to be on a payroll by payroll period basis based on their unique payroll schedules. We also take the extra step of explaining it to the employee. So when they start to see that dip in income, they're not surprised by it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you highlight, communication being incredibly important no matter how you're managing this process, and that like upfront communication, regular communication, and making it clear how things are coming about, I think is so important. The transparency that, you need to have in this. The other thing I was thinking about when you were talking, and did I just lose it, was if you had any data related to like retention when leaves are handled in a with an employee centric or employee kind of experience in mind, like how that improves maybe retention of people returning from a leave or things like that.
Yeah, I think the last metric I saw was like maybe like have a 25%. I'm going to quote this wrong. I need to look it up. So we'll include it as the follow-up. But from my
Yeah.
own personal experience, employee retention is huge if you mishandle the leave of absence experience. When someone's on a leave, well, parental leave specifically, maybe medical or other types of leave, a little bit less so, but you have a lot of time to reevaluate what's going on in your life. And if you don't feel valued where you are currently, people move around, people shuffle versus
Yeah.
actually taking care of them, making them feel like the company's doing the best they can, that they are being supported while they're out, they're much more likely to return. And if you wanted to turn this into a business case, the cost of bringing someone back from leave as opposed to replacing them at maybe 1 point, however much X their salary to find someone new, very clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that was most of what we had planned to cover. And obviously we have a lot of resources to share in I like you call them the show notes. I think it makes it sound more fun. So we'll share a lot of resources there, but I want to give another opportunity for anyone to just unmute and ask questions or share what they're doing. Because I think another great part of this is all of us learning maybe what some other great practices out there that are happening.
Absolutely.
Just kind of curious what states and companies are doing around leave for people that are transitioning, like from one gender to another. What are you seeing around that?
I think a lot of that would qualify just under medical. So unfortunately, you would probably be up to like a disability carrier and a doctor correctly figuring out the forms to ensure that a person is able to take as much leave as they actually need to recover. For anyone that's not as familiar with the leave process, again, when someone's taking like a medical leave, there's a lot of work that the employee needs to do, unfortunately, to get their leave approved. You have to connect with your doctor, have them fill out the forms. I actually just went through this myself with my spouse. He's taking a leave to care for his mother. And so we had to get the forms, understand the forms. Her situation, of course, does not exactly apply to the way the questions are worded. They're so confusing, even for someone that talks about leave literally all day, every day. And then having to fill it out, having to give it to the doctor, go back and forth between the offices and then get those over to the adjudicating bodies. It was not an easy process. And we're able-bodied. We weren't the person taking the leave for ourselves. So having that additional level of stress for someone that's taking a leave because they're transitioning, because they're having surgery, I'm getting a little emotional talking about it, but it's a lot. And so again, Sparrow, how we help is we actually, because we're filing on the employee's behalf, we actually have them give us their provider's contact information as well. So we can push that process forward and take even more burden off of the employee when they're going through those times.
All right. Thanks so much. I was just wondering how that's kind of panning out, given there's a lot of controversy, conversation about the whole topic in the first place, right? Yeah. So thank you.
It reminds me of when Roe versus Wade was overturned and all of a sudden companies were talking about, okay, how can we say we support costs for maybe out of state medical procedures? What kind of language can we add? Should we be revising our policies? Very similar.
Yeah, and and particularly checking with the insurance providers that you're working with and making sure these procedures and things are, covered and supported is important too, I think, beyond the leave aspect and just working with your broker or insurance to make sure that that's included.
Yeah.
Other questions?
If no questions, I'd love to hear what's resonated with everyone from the conversation today. you're not comfortable coming off mute, tell us in the chat.
I mean, I'll just say I'm an external consultant and coach. So I just am not honestly up to date on all of these things. So I just wanted to be here today to hear what's going on so I can have a better understanding when I'm working with my clients that are obviously internal, kind of what they might be dealing with. So thank you for letting me just sit in and soak. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. And yeah, we're all learning, I think, every day on this topic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and being more well-versed in something like leave, which is becoming more and more of a pain point, allows you to differentiate a bit more. I know we have some benefits, professional benefits brokers on the call today here. Being able to speak competently around this issue and provide clients with resources is huge. So thank you for educating yourself.
I will say I also kind of similar to Karen, I feel like I work as an HR business partner, but I partner with our leave specialists. And so when I am dealing with someone from my client group, it's a big deal to me to either have the specialist on the call so that I'm, not giving them incorrect information, but also, making sure that I'm connecting them with the right people. And yeah, I think being well versed in that is something that I'm looking to improve. And I think another thing that really stood out to me was like uh, the idea that there are going to be even more diverse and like just how many different reasons there are that someone might need to take leave. Like some of those thoughts I had never considered that would be a reason that someone would be approved for leave. So I'm looking forward to, having, I think, more routes for employees to get their needs taken care of.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else before we adjourn? Awesome. Well, it was really great to have you, Emily. Thank you. I know you shared so much good information, and we will include the benchmarking report, which has such great information as far as what others are doing. And as you're building policies, especially if you're looking at, new types of leave that aren't yet included at your company, I think that will be really helpful. So thank you for joining. Thanks for listening in. Thanks for sharing all of your great information, Emily. We have our next meetup coming in June. Topic TBD, but it will be, another great topic in the, HR leadership development coaching space, I'm sure. So thank you so much for being here, and hope you can join us on the next one. Thanks all.
Scotty.
And thanks again to our sponsors who were here. And sorry, Corey, I missed calling out and saying hello to you when you joined. I couldn't see everyone's faces, but thank you for being here and for sponsoring these meetups. Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you all. Have a great afternoon, and see you on the next one. Bye.
Take care.